Welcome back to Mastery Tips and Tricks Show. I am Heather Lee Chapman, your host and transformation coach, and I am so grateful to be here with Chloe Greenberg, who is a life coach and art teacher who empowers ambitious individuals to become their greatest inner cheerleaders. And today we are talking about how to love yourself and be confident for high achievers. So thank you so much for being on the show today, Chloe. Please tell us more about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be here. I'm a coach. I've got two sides to me, as you said. So I've got a coach, which is where I empower those who have many goals, and that's through coaching programs and individual one-on-one. And as the art teacher, I love helping people to bring art to their lives through programs that I teach with watercolors and acrylics. And basically, through the art, which is what I really want to focus on here, or sorry, the coaching is where I help people go from feeling the chaos, the overwhelm, and the burnout quite often. And they go from feeling this confusion of where their life is going, how they feel about themselves, how they feel about their life, to a place of clarity and finally fulfillment. So that's exactly what I hope to share with you today more of as well.
I love that. And one of my biggest goals is to help people live a more fulfilled life. So I love that we're aligned with that because at the end of the day, it's really about what fulfills us and not what we think is supposed to fill us. And that really takes self discovery to be able to live a life that's authentic and leaves us fulfilled. So thank you so much for doing what you do. And would you love to share a little bit more about your story and how you got started?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, really what got me into this whole role was I actually started out in the graphic and web design space. And that may seem very disconnected at the moment, but it comes together because when I was doing different designs for companies, helping them starting their brands, or rebrands, I would do, the logos, the websites, but then the marketing materials. And in order to do that, I would have to analyze their purpose, their values, their mission, and their brand identity, brand personality, a whole list of things that I thought, wow, there's so much intention into the things of how they are wanting to be perceived and put themselves out there. And I thought, hold on a second, like we too also have values, a mission, a purpose, personality, and all these other things that a business does. So why are we not paying attention to ourselves and the way that we care about businesses? So that's really what got the idea started, but truly what kind of made the jump to actually taking action on going into the coaching space was because a really dear friend of mine, someone that just makes some like everyone feel at ease when you're in this person's presence, um, is someone that I care a lot about. And so I was away for a period of time. We lost a little bit of touch, and I got a message sharing that this person was missing for a week. And I later discovered that days after that, that he had committed suicide. And honestly, it was really devastating
Mm.
on many levels. And I found that that's what really prompted me to want to help others because I just can't, in that moment and during that time, I couldn't even imagine the amount of pain that he felt and just how alone he must have felt. And I have been there too. It really just got me to just want to fight for people who just don't know how to better help themselves. And I don't want anyone feeling that pain. So, really, that was what got me into this space. And yeah, that brings me to today, basically.
I love that. And I love that you shared that. And thank you so much for your authenticity. And you're not the first guest to share that, a similar story. And I just had a great connect call with somebody today who that's now part of their mission because they were a survivor of it.
Mm.
And now they actually get to help others who are struggling because there's this persona that we have to put on often by society standards that everything's perfect and that we're so perfect. And yet there's usually so much going on behind those closed doors that we feel afraid to share or maybe aren't allowed to share or or we just don't know what resources or people are there to help us. And I've had a family member, my grandfather passed away and died by suicide as well. And
Mm.
it is more common than we think, and yet not commonly talked about. So I'm grateful for your authenticity, for you sharing, to bringing it to the forefront, because there are so many people out there who have so much potential. They just need the right community, people, resources to be able to help them to get to where they're going and really live out that potential and be fulfilled. And I'm so grateful that you get to do that now, so that hopefully no one else has to feel alone like that.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you for sharing that as well. I find same as what you were sharing, like I found myself in patterns where things were not good in my life before that event. And I had luckily found some tools that helped me get out of that. But things like, you know, alcohol, getting in the wrong relationships, overeating to like to the point of binge and bulimia, not fun things to go through, but I didn't know that it was important to do things that could help me feel better or just like better handle this. So, yeah, thank you for opening up that door to chat about that.
Yeah, and it's so important because there are so many tools. And I know I struggled with mental health for, I think it's an ongoing thing. I don't think it actually ends. There's so much going on in the world that it would be wild if you didn't feel impacted, and that there's so much available to us. But just it's kind of like behind closed doors. I know that the self love that we're going to talk about today and that confidence in yourself is self love, that there's so much potential for you on the other side of it, and you don't have to go it alone. There are mentors, coaches, communities, resources, so much that can help you. And now we get to be the people to extend the hand to those who may be struggling. And I know that was me for many years. Struggled with eating disorders, bulimia, totally lack of self love, which I didn't see at the time, right? And was addicted to this idea of perfection
Hmm.
that was impossible to reach and sustain because societal standards can seem a little crazy. And then we put even higher standards on ourselves. And so self love, my friends, it's not something that we talk about too much. And it's something that's so important. And that might look and feel different for so many people. And I think as high achievers, as we're addicted to that perfection, and being perfect and having that persona, that we often are maybe the people who probably need to extend the hand. Yet there's this fear of judgment. And so we don't, and we suffer in silence. And I know I did for many
Hmm.
years.
Yeah.
Until I was introduced into the concussion and brain injury world, where mental health was greatly talked about, being trauma informed. There was so much. And the moment that actually had me flip a switch was a family member almost died from anorexia. And I
Oh,
realized
wow.
I was the role model and I had to change. Otherwise, I wasn't being that role model for her. So that was my flip. And we aren't waiting for a traumatic experience, right? To be able
Hmm.
to make that change. And you could have mentors and coaches to be able to help you over that. We say we usually have to have a traumatic experience to make a change, and you don't have to get there. You can make
Hmm.
the change before that. There's so much available. We just don't know what we don't know, and we have to release that addiction to perfectionism and be
Hmm.
vulnerable and extend the hand. So I'm so excited to
Hmm.
dive deeper into what self love is. And as the high achievers who are putting on the persona of perfection, we know we all struggle in many different ways. And it's time to build that self love and that confidence in yourself. And so I'm super excited to dive into your tips. And thank you again so much for being on the show. So let's kick off with tip number one: how to set boundaries and show care for yourself. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I find often people believe that Boundaries are things that, like rules that we put on others, and that is quite the opposite in terms of how to best handle boundaries. Boundaries are things that we are realizing, okay, there's something that's uncomfortable here, something I want to change, and I don't like it, and I need to state something that is going to create a change. However, it's what we can only control ourselves, and we cannot control others as much as we want to and as much as we think we can. So often it's best to realize, okay, I here's a like a something that I can share with this person that makes it clear when X behavior happens, this is what I will do. It's not something that you're making like a rule on somebody. If they do this, here's the consequence. Um, so I think that that's a huge myth that people believe, oh no, I just easily throw out a statement like just don't ever do that again. Um, and then also I find people forget to add in consequences, and that's where it can become tricky because underneath the layer of wanting a boundary is this idea of, do I love myself enough to even state the boundary in the first place? Do I believe that I'm worthy of requesting change in this space? And sometimes it isn't a request, which is different than a boundary, but sometimes they can overlap. So finding space for love for ourselves is something that is incredibly important. And that is what will help you when you start building that self-worth. You're going to be more confident in saying, wow, that doesn't work for me. There was a moment that I had with someone who was a new friend, and she had shared some statement with me that was a word that I wouldn't use for myself. And so when she said it, it wasn't a nice thing. um, I said, "Oh, I'm gonna hand that back to you." I was genuinely in a good state and also didn't believe that she was telling me that, honestly. And so when she actually doubled down on that fact and said, "Actually, no, I stand by what I said," I was like, "Oh, okay." And I took that as information, which is where I think a lot of people can forget to do that, or maybe not even acknowledge that that's
An
something that is
option.
important to do. Yeah. To just analyze, okay, they are telling me what their behavior is. They're not willing to change. This is where you step in with what can I control? And the only thing you can control is yourself. So as a result, we ended up having a conversation and chatted about that moment because I also realized throughout this and parts of what I shared, um, what I didn't share actually was this thought, which I'll share with you, which is I can see that and know that how people treat themselves is sometimes how they treat others. And that was not my bubble to fix, which was the way that she speaks to herself was probably normal. That statement that she shared with me. And I just don't talk to myself like that. So, um, yes, it's information. And yes, I wanted change in the friendship. And I had to make that clear. I am most comfortable in group environments going forward. And individual time is just not best for where I'm at in our friendship at this moment. And it was clean and clear. And honestly, she thanked me for being really honest and bringing up the fact that I was very upfront with, hey, let's have a chat. Something's uncomfortable here. Let's talk about it. And I hope to empower people to feel like they can do that as well and make it easy because really what boundaries are there to do is you're basically giving people a map for how to love you best. And sometimes it can feel like the opposite, especially if the other receiving person on that end is used to walking all over you, maybe in a sense, whatever way that might be, whether it is asking things of you or you know, just not they're more of a taker and you're more of a giver, that can be a place where things feel really uncomfortable. They may not receive it well. Um, but I'm sharing with you one case where actually she did receive it well. And so sometimes that can happen. So just be prepared for different scenarios. And really, it comes back to control what you can control, and that's yourself. And if they have a reaction that isn't met well, you know, you can be with yourself. You can be with that emotion that comes up for you that just got stirred up because they're in chaos mode because they don't like what you said or how you gave that boundary or just giving one at all. Um, just know that it's okay and it's a part of the process. And sometimes both ways, not saying anything or saying something, are going to feel bad. So, which part would you prefer? Is it the one where you're going to regret not having met your own needs, or where you walk all over yourself? I mean, yeah, both sides. So that's the initial take on how boundaries and
And what you just said reminded me of something I just saw Brene Brown say. And she said, you can either be in discomfort or resentment. And so the discomfort would be the confidence and the willingness and the self love to have the conversation that
Mhm.
is going to be uncomfortable and hopefully met well and often not. And in NLP, one of the old sayings is like, well, that's something that was triggered in you, and I take no responsibility. And in our school of thought by Todd James, he believes in our communication, we can always take responsibility and see how we can elicit a better response by communicating differently. And sometimes you can do your best and it's still going to elicit maybe not the best response. And so it requires confidence and
Mhm.
self love to be able to even make requests or set boundaries and to have the discomfort to have the conversation versus the resentment later when you are then hanging out with that person or doing the thing that you really don't want to. It would have been maybe better to be in the discomfort, to have the
Mhm.
self love, to set the boundary, to have the conversation. And doing that is showing that we love ourselves. And here is my self worth. And it's okay to have standards to say, this is what I'm willing to accept, and this is what I'm not willing to accept. And that is a form of self love. So I truly do believe that setting boundaries shows care for yourself, and it might require discomfort. And it's
Mhm.
better than the later resentment. So I love that.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And you do, it's true. You need confidence to be able to say to yourself, first of all, this is what I want to say, and this is how I want to say it. Getting that clarity is key. And then next, actually taking action on it, you need the confidence and the courage to be able to say, no, I deserve to say this. I deserve to assert whatever is on my mind and make sure that it's received respectfully. It doesn't have to be received well.
Mm, I like that. Yeah, because like you said, we can't control others,
Hmm.
right? Only ourselves. So we can't control the response, and we can control ourselves by setting that boundary.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it. Amazing. So, self love tip number one is setting those boundaries, having those uncomfortable conversations to really show your self worth and what you're willing to allow and not allow. And I know that we can be flexible with our boundaries and that can be healthy. And then there's some boundaries that are inflexible, and that's also healthy, right?
Mhm.
So, also knowing where you stand on that, where you talked about consequences in NLP, we say, before we do a thing, we say, let me get back to you, let me check.
Hmm.
And then, do I have the time, money, and energy? If no, first of all, do I want to?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Then do I have the time, money, and energy? And if so, what would be the agreement? What would it look like? And if that's not met, then what's the consequences? Right. So perhaps if that friend had been like, right, you that talk doesn't land well for you. I won't speak like that when we hang out together. That might have been different. And it wasn't. And so then the consequences, that's cool. I'd still love to hang out with you in group settings. And then I
Hmm.
think, like, truly, truly, and especially for women, the follow through
Hmm.
really shows the self love and
Yeah.
is often the hardest part to do. So if we set the
Hmm.
boundary and it's broken, do you want to be flexible with that, or do you want to instill that consequence? And if so, are you going to follow through on it and truly show that self worth and self love for yourself? And it takes practice and time to have those kind of enrollment conversations with people and make requests and get comfortable being uncomfortable. And often in the end, you are left with a odd feeling because it's
Yeah.
something new, right? It's discomfort, that's
Hmm.
for sure,
Yeah. Yeah.
and worth it in the end.
Yeah. And it's uncomfortable because you're causing potentially someone pain. And if you've been so used to managing people's pain for them, it doesn't feel normal, like you said. And it's true that the end piece is making sure that you stick to the consequences. If you feel that that's still nothing, not something that you can be flexible with, truly it is maintenance. But maintenance can come from self-love, and that's what will stem from it all. So just having that confidence in yourself is what will naturally make it an easy process.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
know before I did my NLP course, I thought I was like good with boundaries. And then when I started setting more and raised my self care, my self worth, my self love, how uncomfortable it was to
Mm.
have those conversations and how uncomfortable it felt in my body to make those requests. And then also to remind myself that my needs and wants are also valid,
Hmm.
and that's
Yeah.
okay.
So important. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Welcome to boundary setting. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah. And so important to show that self worth because otherwise we can be a doormat and then people start to know us as someone who doesn't keep our word. It's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. She'll just do it anyways.
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's set those healthy boundaries and be known as somebody who honors and keeps their word and is okay making requests,
Hmm.
aka setting boundaries, even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. So let's talk about tip number 2, habits to come back to your center. And I love how when we were talking, you said it feels like coming home to yourself. So when our current or past or external circumstances are not feeling so great or our internal state doesn't feel great, what are some of those habits that we can use, those self care habits to show ourselves some love to help bring us back to center?
So for me, I find journaling is one of the key things that I have to have as a habit, as many days as possible. And maybe for others, it could be something like stretching. It could be um, breath work before checking your phone in the morning.
Mhm.
It really is important to just have moments to yourself. So we're trying to think of this time as not multitasking, which is what we love to do. It's like, yeah, let me listen to a podcast while doing this, or let me, I don't know, chat to a friend while doing this. Sometimes that's great because you can get lots of things done. But when it comes to truly carving out the time for yourself, it is so important to just have you time. So I just want to dive into a little bit more about journaling because it's it's helpful in unpacking the mind. I also hear often that it can be uncomfortable. People don't know how to journal, what to journal. They hear, sure, like doing a gratefulness journal sounds great. Um, but here's how I do it. I find that it's just like we can just imagine. I'll give an analogy instead of kind of describing journaling for a moment. So imagine that we have a room. It's filled with piles of maybe clean but also dirty clothes. And those can each represent a memory from the past, which may be helpful or unhelpful, and maybe future worries as well. And so it's really up to you whether you want to live in that chaos, or if you want to take the time to investigate it, just like Marie Kondo with her TV show called Sparking Joy, where she takes a piece of clothing and she checks it and or checks in with herself about, does this spark joy? And I would like to add, just for this context, something in addition to that, which is, does it need some love? Because so often, many of our past memories are left with holes, needing some mending. And often we drag this clutter with us without realizing specific memories actually need compassion. And because at the end of the day, we all deserve a thriving home inside of our minds. So when it comes to journaling, think about, let's say, therapy, let's say coaching. what we do at the core of it is we ask questions. So, what you're doing for yourself through journaling is literally maybe if a thought comes up that's uncomfortable, start asking yourself questions like, what was the situation, just to get you started in the movement of the pen, and then asking yourself, just check in. Is this true? Or am I putting a mask on my own thought? Could there be an alternative reason why this story might be happening, or why I may be feeling this way? De- like deciphering those emotions, you're kind of investigating it. And one of the key pieces in there is, like Marie Kondo does it spark joy? So do we want to keep that thought in there in a happy place? And if it's not in a happy place, how can we give it compassion? So bringing in that piece of what would that look like if I brought myself into that moment? What would I want to hear? Or what would I want to say? Or what are some things that could help me unpack this in a way that will help me to feel better today and tomorrow and a year from now? So I really want us to start thinking about cleaning up that clutter because we can all use some decluttering sometimes. And sometimes maybe there are days, and maybe you'll even notice that a consecutive series of days, you don't need any mental clearing, but it's just you're noticing your thoughts are actually more focusing on things that are exciting around you. And let's say you were up so early and you heard the birds chirping so loudly for the first time, and there was this one song that you could hear that they were chirping. And just being so present with that and saying to yourself, well, maybe I could make this a gratitude note to myself. That was something that was memorable of my day. Journaling doesn't have to be a strict, like, do A, B, C, D. It can be whatever's on the mind, and also acknowledging, like, it's like you're a photographer taking snapshots of the fun things in your day, and remembering you can come back to your safe space of your journal and just write down, this was like such a random small moment, but I just have to write it down, and I'm so excited to share that with myself so that I can remember it. So that's how I find journaling works for me, and I've seen a lot of growth through people that have done that I've worked with. So I find that that's something that I would love to share in this space.
Yeah, and I like that you talk about unpacking it because for a lot of us, we feel emotions. There's things going on inside our head. It's chaos in there, or or whatever it's looking like. And instead of sorting and unpacking, we like to just put it all back in boxes and pretend it's all perfect, right? Like we were
Yeah.
talking about already. And it's emotional intelligence, which is a newer conversation. Actually, I just heard recently saying that the new currency in dating is emotional intelligence. Like that's what
Hmm.
people are looking for from each other. Their ability to look at their traumas, their struggles, or their things they've gone through and unpack it and let it go, so that they can feel their feelings and move through the experience instead of, I call it our Santa sack of shit. We just carry it around with us, and then it's full of bricks and it's so heavy. And then we start to use them as limiting beliefs and excuses like, I'd love to, but. And they start to hold us back if we don't actually start to unpack it. And I know it's not the easiest thing. I say it's like a game of Tetris. Like you took the one box, you unpacked it, and guess what? Boom, boom, boom. Usually here
Mm.
comes another one. And when you begin to unpack things in that mind, in the unconscious mind, and heal yourself, what actually happens is your unconscious mind goes, oh, hey, you now have the mental space to also deal with this. And so
Yeah.
just allowing what comes up to come up and be able to move through your feelings, and nothing's good or bad, right or wrong, except for what you make it. It's simply an experience, and allow yourself to feel what you're feeling about it, and unpack it so that we can leave it in the past instead of carrying around all those bricks with us that begin to weigh us down throughout our life. And I love that you share the journaling exercise for it, because they're probably like, well, how do I unpack? Right. And
Yeah.
journaling is a great way, and asking yourself questions. If you really want to get to the true answer, the best way is to ask questions and to really begin to look at maybe what questions you need to ask. So I love that you said, like, what is the contributing factors? Is it true? How can I give myself compassion? Um, and putting yourselves in others people's shoes as well as you unpack it, as you go through that experience, and then minding the stories that we make up along the way. So really truly asking, is that true, or is
Mm-hmm.
that a meaning I gave to the experience? So in the human experience, there's something that happens, we usually call it the stimulus, which triggers something in us which is usually unhealed. um, and then we usually project that unhealed trauma out into the world. Our perception is our projection. So we actually want to look at what's that stimulus and what's that unhealed thing in me, and maybe break it down and ask yourself the right questions. And then really, my favorite is that, then what would you prefer? Right? What would
Yeah.
you prefer for next time? And of course, we always say that's the contrast. So it didn't work. What would you prefer? And then what's the lesson? So, what can we learn from the experience? Because we live in unconscious loops and patterns. So, if we don't get the learnings, we get to live it again.
It's true. Yeah.
And then I say the blessing. So, what can we be grateful for about the experience so we can change the energy around it as well? And it's not the easiest thing, especially if you're unpacking some big traumas. It may take a few layers of the onion to go through, and it's still
Mm-hmm.
super important to do. So, I love that some of the habits to come back to center are journaling to unpack those traumas, instead of carrying them around like a heavy sack of bricks.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, amazing. And journal, maybe that's something in your future, is a journal with prompts in it.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that has come up with clients before is like, I'm stuck on journaling. What do I journal?
Mm-hmm.
What do I ask myself? How do I do it? And for us, we do very scripted, like write your goals, and they're not necessarily self discovery journaling. So I love
Mm-hmm.
that you've brought that up today, because it's a whole new way to look at journaling.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, my favorite tip. Well, actually, next two are pretty amazing. It is okay not to be perfect. So tell us why that's so important to for self love and confidence.
Yes. Oh gosh. I mean, yeah, it was interesting thinking about this topic and just seeing how I fit into that myself. I, underneath it all, for so many years, just felt I was alone. I felt like I was imperfect in so many ways, and I felt like I was unlovable. I can just picture in my mind so many cases where I would actually run away from situations. I would actually hide in my discomfort and cry and just be just overwhelmed with these feelings of I don't know how to fix this and I don't know how to get out of this. My only know-how of what to do with this big emotion was just like how do I get out of, how do I feel better, how do I numb it, how do I get just erase it? And that's never really the answer. When it comes to, yeah, I have to think about things this way in some cases, but we have hospitals, and hospitals are for our physical body to get better. And what we don't have is a hospital for our minds. We have internal pain in our minds. We go through uncomfortable emotions on a daily basis. That's a part of our human existence. But no one has taught us how to improve that. No one has taught us how to care for ourselves and tend to that garden that's in our mind that we really have to be weary of. And we build up these stories just like these pieces of clothing or bricks in some cases. And um, it's not wrong to feel like we're broken in times, but I also want us to pay attention to the fact why we think we're broken or we're not perfect came from an original story, which was the only way that you could feel okay in a certain situation, let's say as a child, which is the most often case, was to have these coping mechanisms that made you safe in the moment, but when we carry into adulthood, those are no longer what keep us safe. So through that understanding, it's like, okay, how can I change my behavior when things come up for me again? I don't want to throw a tantrum, or I don't want to hide, or I don't want to numb the pain. And so to feel like we're alone in those urges to carry out those instinctive feelings of feeling better immediately in the immediate moment, let's think about the long term. How can we do that? How can we set ourselves up? Because as high performers, it's so easy to think about wanting to do all the best things and we're trying to do it all, and the overwhelm sets in. And you're just up to here. You have no more space to float. You're just drowning in all these thoughts. And I've got to tell you, things that I did as well as a perfectionist were I would meet deadlines, but sometimes not because I would want this, whatever I was working on, to be so perfect. Because so early on in my early years was developing this need to feel like, okay, everything I do has to be perfect or else I am not a good person. And what I'm doing is instead validating myself through my behaviors. And I don't want that for anyone because that's not the case. We love you for who you are as a person, but because you're doing one action that doesn't, make everyone happy, it's okay. It's not who you are. So it's okay to not be perfect. And you're going to make mistakes along the way. And it's a part of the process. I think so often another thing that comes to mind is we actually have to fail a certain number of times to be able to learn something, to be able to grow. So don't be embarrassed and know that like we're all going to be embarrassed oftentimes. So when we're trying to learn new things, we're going to feel like a newbie. We're going to feel like a beginner. And I see that even in my art classes as well. These people will just stay quiet. They will hide in their spaces, and I'll check in. I'll just do a quick, hey, what's going on? How are you doing? Can I help you? And some are willing to just say, oh yeah, totally, take it away. Like show me what I could improve on. And others may remain quiet. And so we're all different in how we react to, I don't like what I'm doing. I don't know if what I'm doing is right. And it's okay to ask for help. It's 100% okay because we're all going to make those mistakes as we go along. So that's what I'd like to share in that space.
Yeah, and it's okay not to be perfect. And remember, we are not our behavior. Our behavior is our conditioned responses, and that's not your self image. That's not who you are. It's who you were in the moment. So
Hmm.
give yourself grace, give yourself peace, show up the best that you can. That's going to look different every single day. And all you can do is your best, and your best is enough. And seeking perfection leaves us usually in incompletion and inaction because we don't think it's good enough yet.
Yeah.
And I love how you're saying, we usually say, unless it's perfect, then I'm not lovable or I'm not good enough. And so
Hmm.
just being aware of what meaning you've given to that perfectionism. And if it's not loved by everybody, right, whether perfect or loved by everyone, however that is perceived by you, then it means I am, not insert what that is. And that's actually something I just cleared recently in one of my timeline therapy sessions, is not requiring approval from everybody. Because I thought if everybody doesn't love me, then I'm not good enough. There's something wrong with me. And had to be okay with, I am who I am, and I might not be everyone's cup of tea, and I'm going to have to be okay with that, because the only way I can be my authentic self, instead of searching the perfectionism, which is for me was searching for approval from everyone, um,
Hmm.
I won't get to live that full, authentic, fulfilled life if I'm not being who I want to be, and instead being the person who I am is perfect to suit everybody else, right? So
Hmm.
learning to love yourself also means we are not our behavior. We don't require approval from everyone, and it's not going to be perfect. And just keep
Hmm.
failing forward and learn from
Yes.
the mistakes.
Oh gosh, totally. Yeah.
And it's a journey, it's a life process, it's life school. Like it just is what it is. And so do
Yeah.
your best to find the joy along the journey, and release the perfection seeking. It's great
Mhm.
to be great, and just be mindful. It's okay not to be perfect.
Yeah, I love that.
Amazing. Okay, tip number 4, make peace with yourself instead of war. I know
Hmm.
that we are all our own worst critics. And if we often shared our internal monologue with somebody else, or we said it to somebody else, they probably wouldn't be our friend. So
Hmm.
let's make peace with ourselves instead of war. Tell us more about that.
Yeah. It's totally make peace with yourself instead of war is something that I say in my mind at least often because it's so easy. Like we're going to have negative thoughts. That is our inner critic. Going to be a part of us because it's there to keep us safe. And sometimes it's not always true. Because it's the emotions that we feel that are causing this trigger for a thought to come that's telling us, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not whatever it is, fill in the blank. And when you have so many goals and you're striving towards so many things, um, coming back to our last point, just basing ourselves on accolades is really what I found myself in. And when I didn't have certain titles or didn't identify as that anymore, it was like, who am I underneath all of this? And there's this need for self forgiveness, which honestly is an act of self love, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to realize that us as a whole is maybe some parts of us have areas that we don't love, but can we aim to put the spotlight on some of those spots that we don't love about ourselves and just instead of having them be completely rigid where we get triggered and it's not malleable, it's not flexible, we just get into a state, can we start to soften that with love and just say, identifying with something that comes to mind. This is where journaling comes into play because if we take an idea that's like just burying us down and we say, okay, you know what? I see you thought you've been around for a week. So you start writing that down and you start unpacking it. The more that you get comfortable with unpacking these negative thoughts, yes, it will be uncomfortable, especially when you're beginning this whole process. The passion piece of realizing, you know what? There was a reason why this sentence was needed in my past of telling me something that's not okay, but it's like, okay, let's talk to that inner critic. Let's talk to that whatever voice is coming to your mind, and instead let's replace it with the coach version of you. I want you to start saying, you know what, there's two sides to this story, and I'm now going to take ownership of this thought and I'm going to turn it into something that is I can see myself as I'm not imperfect. How can I fill that with joy in that space? So we're coming back to kind of tying these ideas together, but what we're not looking for is to be validated by external people or things. And I see this so often in clients where, they'll come and they'll say, well, I want to share with you something that's come up. And then it will be like, these are all the people that I've told, and these are all of their opinions. And I'm like, okay, let's work with that and also acknowledge that um what do you think, what's your thought process in this whole story, this situation, whatever's going on for you, and instead of seeking validation elsewhere, how can I be there for myself? How can I be my biggest cheerleader in this moment? And currently you're gifting that to other people and losing yourself in the process. That's become a pattern. And I know what that feels like because oh my gosh, has that ever been me? I remember years ago a therapist calling me out on that and her actually saying, why do you care about other people's opinions? I don't know if that was the best approach for her to go about, especially with that attitude, when I was in a very vulnerable state.
Mm.
But it hit me hard, and I heard what she had to say, and it was loud and clear. Like when I have uncomfortable things, am I going to people that really don't know the context, number one, or have the education or the skills to help me process whatever that is? Are they the best people to help me in this particular situation? And who is the best person to go to? And always it is ourselves. So this is why writing down things that are coming to mind. And again, also maybe journaling isn't someone's thing. That's totally okay. And that's, I hear that often too. But finding a way to process this with someone that makes you feel like, okay, this is a good sounding board here. We're not looking for someone to take our emotions for us, but it's like, how can I better handle this? And that's what I want to start getting people in the groove of. And I love seeing the results of that, of like the joy moments where it's like, oh yeah, no, I dealt with that and I dealt with this. Like they're coming back and saying, oh, I know how to do that now. And they're just realizing that. So I can't wait for that to be a part of everyone's process of feeling like, okay, I know how to handle things that are really difficult and acknowledge that when things are really hard, and if I do beat myself up through that process, I can give myself some sort of love in that process really quickly. And if I need to, process it later. Sometimes in the moment isn't the best time to process an emotion. So finding the right time and making note of, okay, if it does come up for me again, let's make a time and space for that because I deserve to take ownership of how I feel. And so learning to love the inner critic for what it does, but becoming a coach is really my key foundation there.
Yeah, I love that. So hearing that inner critic and then maybe coaching that inner critic. And I love that final part where you're saying sometimes at the moment is not the best time. Like we got to let it settle a little bit, let it simmer, and then
Hmm.
we can unpack it. And really, truly giving yourself the space, the compassion, the forgiveness, so that we can really make love with ourselves and have peace with ourselves instead of that internal war. And everyone knows what I'm talking about when you're having that battle up there, yet none of it is real or hasn't happened or could happen, or it's a story we've given to an experience. And it just goes on and on and on in there. And what if we actually paused, give ourselves some love in the time, unpacked it when we had the capacity to do so, and allowed ourselves to actually feel our feelings, which are all valid, and just allow them to be felt and then begin to really make peace within the mind. And yes, to have the skills and the tools, we are always adding into our tool belt of how we can be better versions of ourselves. And that's really what coaches and mentors get to do, is they get to better equip you because life is going to keep happening.
Yeah.
And if you are continually as a high achiever going for greatness and excellence, there will often be even more things for you to overcome. And that's why most people aren't willing to break that stuff down and will often stay where they are. And that's why they say only about a 20% of the population actually lives it fulfilled on their terms. And this is the hard work of
Hmm.
why often many people don't, is because they're not willing to face that inner critic or even acknowledge it. And honestly, before all of this, it's the awareness that it's there. Like, hello,
Yeah.
hello, negative self-talk. You're we can put a few
Hmm.
words there.
Yeah.
And I'd really prefer to make peace with myself and ask myself the right questions, have the emotional intelligence to unpack it, be okay that I'm not perfect, because that would mean acknowledging that there's things to unpack.
Hmm.
And then use the tools that you get from coaches, mentors, books, free events, seminars. There's so much out there now that was not even normalized at all as we grew up. Like, I remember my
Hmm.
niece in grade one, um, in kindergarten, like my sister was meditating with her and they meditated in class. And I was like, oh, we got things thrown at us. Like, it wasn't like, oh, you're having a bad day. I wonder what emotional things you need to unpack. Go meditate. It was like, you're bad, wrong, go in the corner, throw some chalk at you. Like, it was, and for our parents, even worse, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, all it was the physical that was addressed. All there were hospitals there, and mental health was so stigmatized. I still believe that it is, just not necessarily in the same way. And so
Hmm.
that's why this conversation is so important, self-love. And if I could give you one cool tip today that I find super interesting, also can be challenging and also very rewarding, is mirror work. Begin to tell yourself in the mirror good things about you and really start to build that self love and that confidence in yourself. And it might start as a little whisper. And I dare you from this moment going forward, every time you see yourself in the mirror, give yourself a compliment and tell yourself something you love about yourself and truly begin to make peace with yourself instead of war. I love it.
So great. Yeah.
Amazing. Is there anything else you'd like to add or share with everyone? And then tell them about the incredible free habit tracker that you have for them and why they want to get it.
Yeah. No, I think we covered a lot, and I do have a habit tracker, and I'd love to show it to you. This is last month's my version. Oh, there we go. Basically, what it has, it's a free habit tracker that I'd love to offer you guys. It allows me to track any habits that I want on one side. I have a little space for what I'm grateful for, because I'm not much of a grateful journaler personally, and I can remember one thing or two things about my day at the end of it. So that's what I write in that little tiny space. And at the bottom, what's important there is that I have reflection, because it's about asking myself, what are some of the patterns coming up? How do I feel about the month or a specific habit? What made it more difficult? Things that will really help you to start identifying, how can I make habits easier? And so that's my piece, because I don't find that out there. I haven't seen that out there. So I can't wait to gift that to you. And it's something that I currently do. So I practice what I preach. And I can't wait to see, yeah, if any of you do take the habit tracker on board, how you're going through with that, because I love seeing the progress.
I love it. And reflection is so important. That's how we improve and continually improve. And we say that our beliefs actually show up in our habits. So I like to say, change your habits, change your life. So,
Yeah.
habit tracker, amazing. I always say, habits aren't sexy. I know. And they'll change your life when you focus on them. And whatever you track improves. And so I've been using a habit tracker for years. And one of the ways I got into it was post concussion, just trying to um, keep up with everything and help myself. And then started using it in business as well. And so absolutely love habit trackers. Whatever you track improves. And so no make wrong. If it nothing gets checked off the first week, that's okay. You're building a habit and it takes time. And it really does
Yeah.
take about those 90 days. So habit trackers, guys, are like so undervalued and so incredible for your success. And I love that there's reflection and gratitude included in there. That's amazing. Amazing. So, you guys, we got that link there. It's chloegreenberg.com. So, CHLOE Greenberg.com. And you're going to go there now, grab that habit tracker, change your habits, change your life. And may you choose some self love habits and build your confidence in yourself and what you're capable for and increase your emotional intelligence so you can truly live happy and fulfilled because you are worth it.
Absolutely. Thank you for
May,
having me, Heather.
yeah.
I'm just so grateful.
Oh, me too. Thank you so much for the incredible conversation, Chloe. Absolutely incredible. And remember, everybody, stay happy, healthy, wealthy, expect magic and miracles. And what is the best that can happen? We'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.